Distinguished colleagues,
Federal legislators in the Senate and House of Representatives are once again fine-tuning the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, specifically Clause 84, which relates to the method of party primaries to nominate candidates for elective positions. President Buhari had refused to give his assent to the amendment bill, faulting the National Assembly's inclusion of mandatory direct primaries for political parties. But last week, the National Assembly rescinded its earlier position on compulsory direct primaries and included indirect and consensus methods as options. However, the House of Representatives, which did not include the option of consensus method, is again reversing itself and now supports the method but with some conditions.
I think the House and the Senate have decided to add, I believe, the consensus provision so that there will be no need for conference, but with certain provisos. And those provisos, hopefully, we'll be able to agree and insert them today to protect all aspirants for all positions so that we'll all have an even playing field.
As regards consensus candidates, the amended bill provides in Clause 84(9) that a political party that adopts a consensus candidate shall secure the written consent of all cleared aspirants for the position, indicating their voluntary withdrawal from the race and the endorsement of the consensus candidate. It also states that where a political party is unable to secure the written consent of all cleared aspirants for the purpose of a consensus candidate, it shall revert to the choice of direct or indirect primaries for the nomination of candidates for the aforesaid elective positions. Furthermore, a special convention or nomination congress shall be held to ratify the choice of consensus candidates at designated centers at the national, state, senatorial, federal and state constituencies, as the case may be.
Distinguished colleagues,
the harmonized version of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill is also before the Senate for passage.
For the consensus, the two chambers have produced in this bill now very clear definition of how a consensus candidate would emerge.
The amendment bill is to be sent to President Buhari once again for assent. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
Welcome back. Well, that is what we're starting with today on the program. So we've got some gentlemen joining us from Abuja, 2 at the moment, but two will become 3 as we progress. So Honorable Jeff Ojinaka is a former member of the House of Representatives. He's also a former Deputy National Chairman, Inter-Party Advisory Council. And sitting beside him is Emeka Nwacha, he's a political consultant and former SA to President Goodluck Jonathan. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Morning.
Morning, Chamberlain.
Okay, Honorable Jonaka, let me start with you on this matter. Can we, to what extent, can we heave some sigh of relief having seen the National Assembly transmit this to the President for assent? Honorable Jinka, that's for you.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to congratulate the National Assembly for living up to the expectations of Nigerians by going back to really work on the bill and sending it back to the President. I would like to say that in the name of Almighty God, in the name of anything that the President and fears, not just respect, I would like to urge President Muhammad Buhari to please expeditiously sign the electoral bill into law, into an act of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. This request is born out of the genuine concern of Nigerians that he has to come out of a phobia for the electoral bill. Since all the electoral bills that have been sent to him, he has found one reason or the other not to assent to it. And we want him to rise above any interest, any partisan thing, to be a statesman, to sign this current electoral bill. Just as he did for the electoral, for the petroleum in the PIB. If there's any flaw, there's no law, there's nothing human that is perfect. We cannot expect perfection in the current electoral bill as we have it. And that's why there's a provision and calls for you to send for amendments. In the last PIB, he had to sign, and some days later, he proposed an amendment on some contentious issues and sent it back to the National Assembly, which they passed for him. So with the current National Assembly, if he has any reservation, any issue on any of the clauses, on any of the, let him sign it first, so that INEC can now go back and start the preparation for the forthcoming election, which I'm sure all Nigerians, everybody all over the international community, everybody is looking up to it, because we don't have another option of getting it right in the country. Because if we so fail this time, it will be a doom for the whole of Africa and the entire world. So we must get it right this time. So, and it starts with the president signing. Immediately the president finishes signing, then the electoral management body, that the Independent National Electoral Commission, should now immediately use that as a framework to go back to work. They have to further strengthen the issues, because the electoral bill as it is now cannot address all the concerns and all the issues that will make the election to be the ideal that everybody is hoping. You can't put in everything into the law. So that's why the law has also, the electoral law has also provided for INEC to come up with regulations. And we expect that INEC should be able to go in and look at come up with regulations that will guide, especially party primaries this time. Because I see that all the party primaries that we do in the country are flawed.
Okay, Mr. Chinika, just a minute.
Wrong.
We'll come to that part as we progress, but let me equally get the opening comment of Mr. Onwacha on the same subject matter. So, Mr. Onwacha, look, what kind of undercurrents or dynamics? There's usually a lot of backstory that goes on concerning assenting to this kind of bill. So could you just perhaps give us some background as to what should Nigerians likely expect? Should we expect that, look, the amendments have been done, there should be no further impediments, or what?
Thank you, Chibalin. I think it's commendable that after all the hiccups, the bill is finally going back to the president. These people are all politicians. Everybody, each of them, from the president, the senators, everybody else, have their own political interests. I think these have, to a large extent, dictated the ups and downs we have seen in passing this bill. Everybody has a candidate in mind, has a process in mind, and everybody is trying to propagate a process that will be beneficial to his intentions or his plans, so to speak. I personally agree with the president. A lot of people, there were a lot of fears that the president's primary interest or contention was about electronic transmission of votes. But it appeared to be actually based on the primary and the candidacy process. All the processes, the consensus, indirect primaries, and direct primaries have proven to be flawed in the past. So restricting it to just the direct primaries at first was suffocating. The parties need to have the leverage to be able to choose their candidates as best as they can. And when the candidate now emerges from the process of each individual party, then the populace, the electorate, can decide based on the qualities of each candidate. But it's better to allow the candidates that freedom. Let the parties within our political development, our level of political development, choose their candidates, present their candidates, and take the risks of facing the electorate for failure or success. So after all these things have now apparently been straightened out, I don't think there should be any problem in getting the bill accepted by the president at this time.
Well, Mr. Watcher, do you see any challenge in, I don't know if it's okay for me to jump ahead of post-signing of the bill now, do you see any challenge for the political parties in operationalizing this particular section, this particular amendment that the president has talked about? You know that even with the direct and indirect primaries options, we've had all kinds of litigation such that it's the courts that have had to settle some of these issues. In terms of the capacity of the political parties being able to agree on how to get their things done, throw up the best candidates they can, politically and competence-wise, do you see any challenge in operationalizing any of the provisions, any of the options on the table? The newest of them being consensus. Any litigations that you see, any stops, any banana peels that you think might be in the way that they need to find a way to avoid?
Well, as I said earlier, most of these altercations are driven by individual and group interests within these parties. People have, at this time, we're very close to the elections, quite just about a year. So people have their own candidates, and people have the idea of how best these candidates might emerge. So this is the current that drives all these altercations. Everybody is trying to push processes that might favor their candidate, so to speak. And that is the basic. Of course, there will be problems, you know. Every party is made up of different people, different characters, and different objectives, different political objectives. So those that feel that when the process begins within the parties, those that are not comfortable with the direction it's going within their parties will expect to go to court. But I think, as I said earlier, that given the leverage for choice on the kind of process to adopt within each party is the right thing to do. That is the most democratic path, you know. I mean, the flaws are out there. We had in Anambra elections, we had the candidates who purported to have 250,000 votes as his direct primaries election. But later on came up with only 43,000 during the main election. So where are all the candidates, all the people that voted for you, your own party members that voted for you during the primaries, and they were not available at the general elections? So this is all a process. This is all a process. Eventually, and at the end, we must think of restructuring all these processes. We have to take cognizance of the repetitive problems we have been facing and which continue to exist, and seek permanent solutions to them. You cannot continue with the same broad system which we have seen do not produce the ideal. You must muster the courage at some point to do the right thing.
Okay. Honorable, let me throw the same question, to you now. In terms of operationalizing this law, especially given the fact that over the years, what we have found out is that the courts have had to settle some of the issues that the law already makes clear on the table. Consequently, literally upturning some of the processes in the entire process. So I'm wondering, what are the challenges that you see the political parties themselves having in operationalizing this law, especially in the run-up to the general elections of 2023? Do you see a challenge? Do you see complexities beyond the issue of interests that Mr. Onwocha has mentioned?
Yes, in my response, I would like to urge the politicians to really not to think about self in terms of when issues of law come up, in the sense that you don't know which side you will be. Eventually, the law you make today might catch up with you tomorrow. In the build up to this, a lot of people were saying direct, indirect. But if you recall the results that turned out now in the Ekiti primaries. Some of the senators who participated in the election are now complaining that they are being shortchanged because of the law they made. So the most important thing is that we need to strengthen our legal system. Once you strengthen the legal system, it benefits all, no matter, it will benefit the president, it benefits her to make sure that the right thing is done. And let me say that the greater, we have to learn from our experiences. The Independent National Electoral Commission, as the electoral monitoring body, has a lot of role to play now that if immediately the president signs the electoral bill into an act, they will need to come up with our regulations in terms of how do we handle these processes in such a way that litigations will be less. I can tell you one of the things that I would like to suggest if the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission might be listening, or I will even send a memo to the Independent National Electoral Commission, is that the same way they insisted that there will be biometric voter accreditation system for the voting in Anambra and for the voting that will be coming up in subsequent election, that made it possible for candidates who scored 250-something thousand in the direct primaries to now score 40-something in the main election that they are supposed to have. It has cured a whole lot of this thing. If they now insist that political primaries, in the guideline they will prepare, that the political primaries, for you to participate in the primaries, you must have the accreditation process for that election must be through BVAS. Once you do that, it will cure a whole lot of things. It will cure a whole lot of these litigations and all whatnot. It will eliminate them to a very great extent. The reason is that all of us, people know that in the various political parties, why is there confusion? In the primaries that they just conducted in Ekiti, there's problem in APC, there's problem in PDP, there's problem in virtually, except in all the parties where they were not contest. What is the reason for that? The underlying cause is that the process is usually rigged and manipulated. Before the primaries, somebody will go, they will say they have ceded the party executive to a particular person, they will go and write names. And eventually those people who will conduct the primaries, they will go, even whether it is direct or indirect, they are the same thing, because virtually when people were arguing about direct or indirect, I said it was based on ignorance. Because for indirect primaries, you have to start with the process of direct. And that is in the direct, at all the ward levels, you go and elect the 3-man delegates, who you will now hand over your powers to go and now do the election on your behalf. And that is starting with direct. So, and in that process is usually flawed. In all the political parties, it is usually the issue of writing lists. You will send something like in the last election, I want to congratulate Chief Umogado for challenging the APC primaries in Anambra. Where you went, you will not see anybody anywhere in any of the wards conducting primaries. And at the end of the day, somebody will go and turn in results. Okay, and say that these are the primaries, and before you know it, they will say that they will set up an appeal panel. The appeal panel will go and affirm what they say. They will send it to the National Working Committee. They will also go and affirm it. All right, Mr. Jenica, we can't be doing the same thing the same way. Okay, just a minute. And I hope to get a different result. All right, so I want INEC to go back now and we'll come back to you on that. More details on party primaries so that the party primaries cannot be rigged. Mr. Jenica, just a minute. You know, we have 2 other gentlemen, so we'll like it to just go back and forth amongst all of you, because Mr. Adewale Adebayo has since joined us. He's the presidential aspirant of the 3rd force under a coalition of political parties. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today. Well, he was just giving some... It's a pleasure to be here, right. Thank you. He was giving some practical examples of what happens in some parties. So in terms of your perspective, perhaps the coalition, because I imagine they would have been keeping an eye or 2 on the same electoral bill and the entire process. Now that it's been transmitted to the president, or hoping it'll be assented to, what are your impressions about it?
Well, basically, the Electoral Act It's been going back and forth between the executive and the legislature. And before then, it was going back and forth between the governors and the legislatures of the different parties. What I can see is that there is no perfect law. The things that make law to work, I'm a lawyer, are one, the political or the cultural environment in which that law is passed. Secondly, the motive of those who are operating. So what we need to understand or admit is that for the two main political parties, and unfortunately for a few of the other smaller parties, the intention of the leadership of the party is to cheat. They see themselves as agents of vested interests whose job is to see that the democratic will of the people is not reflected. So they approach the law from a point of view, mindset of sabotage. They will say, okay, wherever there is a loophole, let us take advantage of it. And my feeling is that however much you draft legislation, you cannot predict human behavior. So every iteration of a law is stronger than the one before. But that can also be matched by the stubbornness of the lawbreakers. So from 1999 to date, from the first few cases that we had in the court, notably Egolum versus Obasanjo and other cases that follow, you will see that each time we have an election, people will litigate certain gaps and loopholes and bad outcomes. And then the legislature and the judiciary will come together. The judiciary will pass judgments from which the legislature is supposed to learn. There was a time there was no card reader. Now we have card reader. There was a time I was arguing before the Supreme Court that the card reader, being part of the INEC guidelines, should be complied with. And the Supreme Court said no. Only the legislature can make mandatory provisions, not INEC. So as a result, INEC went back to put all of these provisions before the National Assembly. So we will continue to see that each time we hold elections, unless the culture is changed, that men of integrity are put in political parties, you will see that the politicians rig the elections ahead by constituting executives that are complicit with certain partisan interests within the party. And where elections are pending, that's why you see all the confusion in the executive of the party. They will go to court, get ex-party order to remove the executive that is there. They will continue to jostle up and down. You have factions of the executives. All of these things are manifestations of intention to cheat. So when you have an intention to cheat, it doesn't matter how many measures you put in place, you will still have upheavals arising from the system. So now that we are trying to strengthen the legislation, what I can contribute is to say that the political parties should try to change their culture. Unfortunately, and I'm not saying this just to embarrass APC or PDP, what happened in Ekiti recently has shown that they have refused to learn anything new. So what it might boil down to is that law enforcement has to have an attitude that electoral crimes, because when you commit a fraud, when you go and say someone who is not a party official or is not a delegate is a delegate, you go and get people on the street to hire them, and they come and misrepresent themselves, or you also perpetrate fraud by writing the wrong names and all of that. Crimes committed that are crimes under the law should not be excused because they take place in a stadium during a political convention or gathering. Second, the media should not congratulate or give Passover when somebody has won. Like the story being told about Anambra State. It could not have been lost on the media that there were no 250,000 or 230,000 people in the state. And that should have been copiously reported, and the executive of the party and the so-called winner should have been taken to task. Thirdly, people should abandon political parties that are full of leaders that are dishonest and outright criminal in their approach to these processes. And with so many political parties in place, it should be clear to the Nigerian people that they have options. And those who don't behave too well, people should just abandon them.
Well,
but
we talk
to
about these
rely on
options.
legislation alone, I'm a legal draftsman. I've drafted so many laws,
Right.
and I've seen that to predict human behavior and to exclude every malfeasance is difficult. You have to augment that with some other sanctions outside the legislative language itself.
Okay, we're due for a break in just about 2 minutes, but I'd like you to shed more light on a point you made, and you've made that severally in the course of your submission. And you talked about a certain culture within, the ruling party and the opposition party, culture to cheat, and to subvert, free, fair, and credible elections. And you referenced that, they approach lawmaking with that mindset. And I'd like you to speak to this particular electoral amendment bill in particular and give us your proof that shows that perhaps there are provisions in that law that is meant to sabotage or cheat ahead in this particular one that the president is about to assent to. Do you have provisions that prove that culture which you speak about?
Okay, there are three things you would have to observe. One, in the National Assembly, between the two chambers, you would see that there was no division regarding use of technology, regarding techniques on how best to secure the elections, but you have divisions between those who are already in control of party structures, otherwise known as governors, who want you to use indirect primaries because they've already rigged ahead. They had their conventions earlier, or what they call not convention, congresses. And in those congresses, you are the journalist, you have all the facts. You would see that in many places, members were original members were practically deregistered and new ones brought on board. In many instances, you had split executives. In many instances, the governors just practically wrote names and they announced those names as the executives. The intention is to put together their own electorate, their complicit suborn electorate. Because when you have a three-man delegate coming from a ward or local government, they are going to be the electorate in the convention or primary election coming. So many of them have gone to court. So these matters are in court, they are in public domain. So now the legislators from various states are under blackmail by the governors. You're not going to come back unless you bow to me. Or in any case, some of the governors want to replace their senators. They want to go to the Senate and sit down in what has become a gubernatorial retirement home. So what you find is that all of these pushes and shoves within the party were carried into the National Assembly. So even the advice given to the president with respect to whether to do direct primaries or indirect primaries and all of those things were colored by interest of the people who were doing the advising. So this is very obvious. So what happens is that things that could strengthen our elections, like electronic voting, like verification of identity, like controlling media coverage for even coverage of parties and perspectives, things that have to do with, for example, how to manage spending in elections, language to use, and things like that. They were not controversial.
Okay, Mr. Adebayo.
Because we all need those things. Yep.
Okay, so we'll take a look at, yes, you talked about the processes, how they merge. What about those who are indicating their interest? We'll focus on some of them when we come back in a moment. Don't go away. Gentlemen, you have the latest entrance into the presidential race, perhaps up until the party primaries, and see who emerges. Mr. Nwacha, let me start with you on this one. How does that sit with you?
Particular aspirant or the new set of aspirants?
Aspirants. The new ones.
Okay. Okay, fine. I think it's good that so many people are turning up to contest for president. It gives the electorate a good chance, or a better chance, to make a better choice. The more, the merrier, they say. You know, it's these 2023 elections are looking like they're going to be among the most intriguing in our history. So many things are still uncertain, not just in the two major political parties, but in the general field. You understand? You know, there are a lot of what I call mystery factors, which are still yet unresolved. You know, you have the obvious candidates coming forward, people who we have always known had the propensity to contest for presidency. But a lot of the major joker factors, the trick factors, have not yet declared their interest. You know, and this is going to be major factors in determining how this thing will go. When the president was here with you, interviewed by you last month or so, there was a question about his own choice or his own preference. And his answer seemed to suggest that he had somebody in mind who was holding close to his chest, so to speak. If you look at the character of the APC, the president remains the strongest influence still in that party. And if he says, or if he appeared to say that he had somebody who he has not disclosed, that means that a major surprise factor is still waiting in the wings, so to speak. Come to the PDP. Over the years, since the left government, there has been the absence of a general father figure or a patron who controls or who organizes or who they all look up to for advice and guidance. Tony Aneni, who used to do that kind of function, is now late. President Obasanjo, who could also have stepped into that kind of position, is no longer apparently interested in partisan politics. So what you have now in the PDP is factional, sectional interests, strong men from the northwest, northeast, south, you understand, all pushing forward their interest. There's no general idea of the direction the party is going in 2023. And when you have all these split interests, it makes it more potentially cantankerous, because everybody will be struggling within the small, within the calabash for prominence, not like crabs, and nobody knows how it's going to go. So it's not easy to see how things are progressing. And even in the PDP, you have hidden interests. You have someone like Peter B, who there's so much expectation from. Just yesterday, there was a statement he made, but it's still undecided, so to speak. And so many other hidden factors. So what we expect to see is that in the next few months, next couple of months or so, as these hidden interests which I've referred to, become more obvious, there might be a lot of contest, conflict, if not explosion, in some of these parties.
Whoa. Whoa. Okay, Honorable Ojinika, for you, what do you see playing out?
Well, for the two presidential aspirants that declared their interest yesterday, I would like to congratulate them. Firstly, Governor Aminu Tambuwa, our former speaker, was my colleague in the National Assembly, and I'd like to congratulate him for having the courage to start a second phase of consultation. He aspired last time and didn't succeed, and he's also trying again this time. I wish him the best.
Jinika,
and
when they say
Senator Rocha Sokorocha, who
Honorable Jinika, just a minute.
Who happened
so when they say we're starting consultation, are they essentially telling us I am going to contest?
Well, from all indication, He has made up his mind to consult. So the only thing he's waiting for is for the people he will consult to urge him to do that. And definitely, it will be difficult for anyone to. That is his right. It is definitely difficult for anyone to urge one to forgo his right. It's not. You will not be fair to the person. So you will expect that the end of the consultation that will be the formal declaration. It's like one step further, so that they will not say that the aspiration was based on their personal ambition, but based on the wishes and aspiration of the people. And I'd like to say, in the case of Rochas Okorocha, I said, he is my senator, my former governor, and although yesterday he said his aspiration is not based on the fact that he's from the southeast, that most Nigerians believe that the next president should come from southeast extraction. In his own case, he said he believes that he will make a Nigerian president, that he will be, he's aspiring based on his personal credentials. So based on that, we wish him well. So, and as my colleague here did say, a lot of Nigerians who, as the days go by, will definitely come to aspire. People are waiting for this electoral. One of the things that will instill confidence for very credible candidates to come out for this election will be dependent on the product of the Electoral Act, if the president signs, and then the guidelines that the Independent National Electoral Commission will put in place.
Okay.
By the time people are assured that this system will not be rigged, that it will not be flawed, most very, very credible people will definitely come to, more credible people will definitely come to aspire.
All right.
And that is all that we need to get our leadership system right. Once we get the leadership system right in this country, a lot of things will fall in place. So it is important that we take these issues serious. And the Independent National Electoral Commission has a lot to do. When I say a lot to do in this regard.
All right,
By
Mr.
the time they are battling with the issue of...
okay. Pardon me, let me bring in
parties.
Mr. Adebayo on this one as well. So for you, Mr. Adebayo, I mean, how does it work with the coalition, the third force? Do you consult? Do you make a public announcement? Because you see that you are aspiring to be president as well.
Okay, what we do, we consult with the people, and that consultation has been taking place for 2 years or more. So by the time you invite journalists to your venue, you already made up your mind to run. So the language of I'm consulting is just part of the slangs that they use. By the time I come to a TV studio and talk to the public about issues, you've made up your mind to run. So that's the style of each group. For us, what we are trying to let people know is that in 2023, it's a new start. It's an opportunity for the status quo to be challenged. And we are consulting with the people of Nigeria, and the feelers we are getting back is that they don't want any of these big parties who have ruled up to now. Because you will notice that when they are talking, whoever is coming out, whoever is the aspirant, they are not able to point to concrete achievements. You see how they labor. They are not able to say, I'm going to stand on the legacy of this and that has been done. They just come out and look for things to say. So what we are saying basically is that in 2023, it's going to be an election that is determined by the people. The candidate will come from the people. The movement that's going to carry that candidate will come from the people. And the mandate to govern in a different direction will come from the people. Because as we are talking about people's aspirations and all of that, it's unfortunate that we are talking about these things on top of people having empty stomachs, on people who are living in captivity in Nigeria, waiting for their families to pay ransom, on top of people going to the venue of these declarations by flying over the country. There are people who are not able to drive freely on the road because of banditry and other issues. And when you look at all of these things, you discover that people are more focused not on the internal processes of these political parties, which they repeat every 4 years or so, and the intrigues. People are focused on, are there going to be new people coming out with fresh ideas that can liberate Nigerians from this routine that doesn't lead to anything? There's nothing Nigerians want to gain in having another president who is just one of the same. People want these lingering problems to be solved. Many of the problems we see that even led to the complication in the Electoral Act is just the misbehavior of the people who are in the status quo. So I would say, without taking undue advantage of the opportunity you have given to me, to say that people in APC and PDP should take a warning that Nigerians actually want something new. And their failure so far to renew themselves will mean that people will have to go outside the two of them to renew the country. So even though I'm going to run as a presidential candidate of a third party, I would still recommend, for the good of democracy, that these two political parties should go into the mode of repentance. What they've done in Ekiti shows that they are not in the mood for that at all. So if they don't go into this mode of repentance, to feel that Nigerians are getting ashamed of an electoral system that is full of cheating, is full of forgery, is full of, if you read the judgments that come from the courts and the kind of things that people perpetrate in the name of trying to win elections, you will not be surprised when they get into power and this fraudulent behavior continues. So a person who can rig a ballot will rig the public treasury. It's very obvious.
Well,
so
Mr. Adewale, allow me to...
the leadership being provided by this
it's the leadership element. My apologies, Mr. Adewale. It's the leadership element that raised this question on my mind now, so which I'd like to take to the political consultant on the seat. That's Mr. Onwecha. Looking at the section 131 of the Constitution of Nigeria as amended, I look at the CV, or rather, maybe it's a CV, of what is expected of a president of Nigeria, and I don't think it's any less for that of the governor as well. Just 4 things. He's a citizen of Nigeria by birth. He has attained the age of 35 years. He's a member of a political party and is sponsored by the political party. And he's been educated up to at least school cert level or its equivalent. Looking at this, we want to recruit, we want to employ someone to run the affairs of 200 million Nigerians. And that's all we have. Do you see a challenge with this? Do you see us? I mean, this is what the Constitution says, there's no doubt about it. But in terms of even getting anyone to run for that office, do you see a role for the political parties to actually process and I don't know, probe whether or not that person has the capacity to deliver on that mandate of providing leadership for the leading black nation in the world?
Well, apart from the constitutional provisions or requirements to certifying anyone who wants to run, there are also other moral considerations and even some other legal considerations which the parties can leverage upon in getting the right candidates for their parties. There is a question of verification of certificates, qualifications. University, secondary school is the one thing to fill up a form and say you attended this school and you got this certificate, and nothing to now verify it later. We have seen in history, in our history, so many discrepancies, so many even elections that have been upturned because of this false claims and fraudulent claims. There's also provisions for people who have been indicted by panels of inquiry, by legal processes, criminal or civil, Nigeria or abroad. Are you free of indictment? Do you have anything in your past that suggests you have a criminal history, settlement, or whatever? you know. Then there's personal history, you know, people who have been, by their conduct, people who are viewed in public, who have had altercations, who have had problems here and there. The important thing is that the parties have to critically examine their candidates. You understand? You can see so many candidates coming up. So Nigeria needs only the best.
Okay.
You know, we don't want people with baggages. You know,
Okay.
I mean, somebody, for example, I don't want to call any name, somebody who, in the past few weeks or months, every day there are reports that social and social stolen properties have been recovered from him. University, schools, whatever. You know, you expect that he's currently supposed to be going through a legal process, criminal process, determine those cases of recovered stolen properties. But you see the person coming on TV say he's running for president. I don't know how we're supposed to look at such a situation. They're calling you a thief every day and saying that these are the particular physically certified properties which you have stolen. And you're coming and you give all those one, you're contesting for president.
Well, there are those who will argue, Mr.
We need to
Watcher.
be serious. You understand?
My apologies. There are those who will argue that those are allegations and they have to be proved at one point or the other. But we're running out of time. Let me take this to Honorable. My apologies.
Just for me, sorry. Just for me. There are not allegations. The properties have been recovered from him and taken over by government or by the EFCC. They've been recovered.
Well, as you said, you can't mention names now. So
it's not an allegation at that stage.
Okay. Let me ask Honorable Ojinika. We're running out of time now, but what are the questions that we should be asking? Now, we have not gotten to the point where these contenders are already candidates. They are still wishing, you know, consulting and all of those words. So the question that I want, what are the questions that Nigerians should be asking? And when I say Nigerians, I'm talking about even members of the political parties who are Nigerians as well. In 60 seconds, give me bullet points. What are the questions that those people who are going to elect their candidates, their flag bearers, what are the questions they should be asking?
Well, Nigerians should really ask for the democratic credentials of the people who will lead them. In terms of in organizations that they belonged, in places they have been, in schools they have attended, and the positions they have occupied, what do they do with those positions? And you can rightly say that no one can change at a very old age. People that are up to 40, 50 can never change. Again, they have already formed their personalities. So if somebody was a 419er or a criminal and he enters into office, you know, you are not expecting to have any change. Or if somebody is a contractor and he doesn't, you know, execute contracts given to him, you don't expect that such a person, when he goes into office, will expect that if he gives contract to people, that those people will execute those contracts. So it's important that any person that comes out to aspire this time, that it's subject to a lot of public scrutiny. People should take out their time to investigate all the issues that concern people. And that's what strengthens democracy in other climes. By the time you come out, even the things that you do in the darkest of all places that you think that people have, people will go and dig them out. And when they dig them out, such people will usually either bow their heads in shame and apologize. We don't expect that we should glamorize criminality this time. And one of the things that will also be very important...
60 seconds. Pardon me, I have to butt in now. But we gave you 60 seconds because of our time. We're totally out of time. Let me get Mr. Adebayo's closing thoughts. I would have asked him some of those questions you raised, really, because those are the questions we should pose to the aspirants. But on a final note, talking about this third force, it's a term that has been abused. If you could do this in less than a minute, just how strong is a third force to contend against the main party and the opposition in Nigeria?
The third force is the largest force in the country. The third force basically means anyone who has not been tainted by the bad records of the PDP and the bad records, as you can see, of the APC. So the third force is the rest of Nigeria. So what we have been trying to do is to do an articulation or getting everybody together, because within the third phase, there are those who are disgusted and said, politics is dirty, I'm not interested. And they go into protest, or they just check out of the country, or they just face their own private businesses. So if you look at any metric you use to judge it, the number of the people who are in PDP or APC up together are not up to 10% of Nigerians who are eligible to be in political parties. If you look at elections, when they are held, including the last one held in Anambra State, you have less than 9% of the population coming out to vote, in spite of all the billions spent by the candidates. So what we have has been an attempt to articulate the frustrations of Nigerians and merge everything together. There are 3 levels. There are those who do just citizens' action. They complain when, for example, you want to inordinately enrich fuel suppliers by increasing the pump price of petroleum products.
Okay.
You claim that there's subsidy somewhere, even though the president said anyone who mentions subsidy should be arrested.
All right, Mr. Adebayo.
So those do public actions and then they go back. Second,
Okay,
we have the NGOs, non-governmental organizations.
I'm
who
afraid,
go
Mr.
around.
Adebayo.
And then the last phase is now to have political parties.
Okay, so we'll see. I mean, many will be looking to see if the third force, or can the third force these other parties out of the way. So I guess time will tell. But I have to thank you, Mr. Adewale Adebayo, presidential aspirant of the third force, a coalition of political parties, as well as Honorable Jeff Ojinika, who is a former Deputy National Chairman, Inter-Party Advisory Council, of also a former member of the House of Reps, as well as America Onwacha, political consultant and an aide, former aide to former President Jonathan. Gentlemen, thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn our attention to still getting the process right. Well, that will be in a moment, focusing on INEC and the House of Reps. Don't go away.